Good morning and happy Sunday. It's a wonderful day, and I'm saying that on Wednesday, so who knows what it's like on Sunday. But regardless if it continues to rain all week as they're predicting, or the sun comes out and shines, one thing we can say as Christians, regardless of what the weather throws at us, is that this is the day the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. So don't allow the weather or other circumstances to dictate how you view the day, but rejoice in what God has done and God is doing. That's not part of our teaching today, just kind of on the fly there. But at any rate, I hope you're having a good day. I hope you've had a great week, and I hope you are honoring God in all that you do. We are going to continue our look into the book of Ecclesiastes. If you haven't watched our sermon, or if you weren't here on Sunday in person, 2 Sundays ago when we started Ecclesiastes 4, I'd encourage you, hit pause, and go back and watch that one. We tackled the first part of chapter 4 of Ecclesiastes, and it's an important message. It's a hard one to get in a way. We deal with the problem of pain, which is something that a lot of people have issues with in understanding and thinking about it and whatnot. And it can build an opposition to God. And so it's a good thing to understand how to answer those questions. At any rate, we're moving on from that. We are looking at Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 4 to 12 today. And so it reads like this from the ESV, which is the English Standard Version. Then I saw that all toil and all skill in work comes from a man's envy of his neighbor. This also is vanity and a striving after wind. The fool folds his hands and eats his own flesh. Better is a handful of quietness than 2 hands full of toil and a striving after wind. Again, I saw vanity under the sun. One person who has no other, either son or brother, yet there is no end to all his toil. And his eyes are never satisfied with riches, so that he never asks, for whom am I toiling and depriving myself of pleasure? This also is vanity and an unhappy business. 2 are better than 1, because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. Again, if 2 lie together, they keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, 2 will withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. So that is our text for today. That's what we're going to be looking at. And I believe, at least how I'm looking at it, it breaks up into 3 areas. One area that talks about kind of an improper reason to work. And then 2 areas that I think contrast one another quite well, that shows loneliness versus community. And so we're going to talk about that as well. We won't spend a lot of time on the first one. I want to focus more of our time on the second 2, because I think they work really well together. And because the first one we've talked about before. However, I will say this about the first one. It tells us that there's an improper motivation for work, for some people's work. And I think it really comes down to the idea of coveting, right? I mean, it says there that, and then I saw that all the toil and all the skill in work comes from a man's envy of his neighbor. Envy, covetousness, they're tied quite together. But there's this idea of, I see what my neighbor has and I want that. I want what they have. And so then I work that I'm able to get that or to get the next thing. It's really this promotion of materialism. And it's wrong. It's so wrong. A desire for what that guy has. And so I work trying to get fulfillment in this material thing. Now, if you can remember when we started looking into the book of Ecclesiastes, when the first sermon that I taught on it was from chapter 1 and 2, where Solomon looks at knowledge, pleasure, and work. Maybe not in that order, but he looks at those 3 things to try and find fulfillment. And he realizes that you don't find fulfillment in those things. They leave you in vanity, wanting more, and never grasping what you went after. And so materialism, we don't find fulfillment in materialism. We find it through God alone. However, the society and culture around us, I will tell you, materialism, it's pretty rampant. It's everywhere. And I can remember, and I've brought this up before when I talked about materialism, and I'll continue to, because it really gets the point home. And it also drives me crazy. I remember hearing this radio ad a number of years ago. It was for an RV sales place. Now, let me first say, there's nothing wrong with owning an RV or a trailer or a camper or anything like that. That's fine, if it's for the right reasons, right? If it's not out of covetousness and materialism and whatnot. Anyhow, the ad kind of went like this. Are you tired of keeping up with the Joneses? So keeping up with the Jones, right? Or Joneses. I forget how you pronounce that one, but it's this idea of, oh, my neighbor bought this new lawnmower, so now I got to go and buy that new lawnmower. Oh, they updated their car, so I got to go get that car. Oh, they put new roof on, so I got to paint that. Like trying to match what the other person has or go above them. And so keeping up with the Jones, as if there's these Jones who just have infinite resources and are continually increasing in materialism. And so you have to match that somehow. That's the idea behind that. So the ad went, are you tired of keeping up with the Joneses? Come buy a new RV from us and be the trend center on your street. And so are you tired of coveting? Well, come and fulfill your coveting here. And then your neighbors will covet after you. You can see, I hope, as a Christian, why that drives me nuts and why it is such a sign of the improper view of things and of work and resources that we have in our society. It describes so many working away to get the next thing. And as Solomon said, and as I will echo, vanity. Absolute vanity. Then there's the comment on laziness. It says that, the fool folds his hands and eats, how does it say, eats himself? How does that go? The fool folds his hands and eats his own flesh. So it's this idea of the lazy man who sits there doing nothing, but in doing that, he basically destroys himself. He's not taking care to feed himself. He's just killing himself in a way. And then there's the comment of wisdom in work instead of working hard and foolishly and doing nothing. So it makes a statement that it's better to have a handful of quietness than 2 handfuls of striving after the wind. It's kind of an ancient way of what we would say today is work smarter, not harder. To sit back in a moment of quietness and think about what you're going to do and then do it smartly, to do it intelligently, or rather to just go out and throw all your effort in it and really accomplish nothing or do a messy job or not an adequate job. And just so simply to work with wisdom and don't just go there working hard and doing nothing, but work with wisdom. So that's that first section. That's all the time we're really going to spend on that. I want us to focus on these next 2 sections more. So the next section, the text reads, again I saw vanity under the sun, one person who has no other, either son or brother, yet there is no end to all his toil, and his eyes are never satisfied with riches, so that he never asks, for whom am I toiling and depriving myself of pleasure? This also is vanity and an unhappy business. There's many people like this today. They work. They're always working. And in the eyes of some, and probably in the eyes of themselves maybe, they're very successful. They build up a pretty heavy bank account with sometimes more money than I would know what to do with. And they have no one to spend it on. And they have no one to leave it to. And the text asks the question, and I echo the question, what's the point? What are you doing this for? We have a tendency, right, as society, when we see something that's not being used for what it was meant to be used, or rather used not to the potential or not to fulfillment of what it was supposed to be used for, to kind of have an issue with that. And you might not think that at first, but consider this. If someone goes out and they buy a brand new Jeep, and then they put a big lift kit on and they upgrade the suspension and they put big mud tires on and they make it this off-road machine, and it's absolutely incredible looking, and then it never leaves the pavement. We have two names for these that we call these things. We call it either a pavement princess or a mall crawler, right? And it's mocking, it's making fun of this trend of souping up this vehicle to the point where it could go almost anywhere and then never leaving pavement with the thing, because you're missing out on what it was meant to do, what those modifications and the vehicle itself was made to do. Same to someone who has a pickup truck and never uses it to tow anything or doesn't put anything in the bed. There's people who have action figures and other toys that have never left the packaging that it's in. And I understand, oh, it's a collectible and all that stuff. Okay, sure, but it was meant to be played with, right? Myself, as someone who enjoys firearms and target shooting and whatnot, there's something called a safe queen, where someone will buy a gun and then they'll put it in their safe and it never gets fired. And it's their safe queen. And to me, it makes no sense. Like, you could have this beautiful revolver and never take it to the range. That's crazy to me. Absolutely crazy to me. And similarly, I will say that the text tells us that there is a reason, there's a purpose behind working. And to the person who works but doesn't have someone to spend the result of that work on, to care for that person, that it doesn't benefit anyone, it seems pointless. It seems like it's missing its potential. There's a word for that: vanity. Now, let's be clear. The vanity comes from the point that there's no other, that a man's work is supposed to be to support his family or others. And it's not just me saying that. In 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 8, it says, "But if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever." Worse than an unbeliever. That's a high thing to say. That's a pretty harsh thing to say. And it's showing that there's a standard here and that there's a reason for your work and that you should work. And on the idea of you should work, in 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 10, it says, "For even when we were with you, we would have given you this command. If anyone is not willing to work, let him not eat." If you can work, you should work. And if you work, you should provide for people out of your work. That's what your work was meant to do. So let your work and what you build up, whether that's produce from your garden or money from your employer or whatever, may it have a purpose, and may that purpose be the motivation for you in your work. And what is that purpose? To take care of those who are in your care. And so if God wants us to work, to gain resource, to then use those resources to care for the people in our care, then when we are properly caring for the people in our care, we are honoring God. And so it shows us why we should work, not just to feed our families, but in doing so, we are honoring God because we're doing the thing that He wants us to do. The text continues. It says, "Two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who is alone when he falls, and has not another to lift him up. Again, if two lie together, they keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? And although a man might prevail against one who is alone, two will withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken." Is such an important lesson for today. In our world today, in the world around us, in our society and culture, we are taught that being successful or being mature is tied to being independent. And I would add that in feminism, which I'm opposed to, there's a title that is given of an example of success in that movement, of being a strong, independent woman. And I want you to stop and think for a second. Did God intend for man to be independent? Did God intend for women to be independent? In Genesis chapter 2, verse 18, God says it is not good for man to be alone. See, he had shown Adam, man, all of the animals of the kingdom, and Adam named each and every one of them. But none of them were a good fit for him. None of them were a good partner. We can say that a dog is man's best friend, but he's not the partner of man. Woman is. And so then God made women, and Adam rejoices at the sight of Eve and says, finally, a partner that is fit for me. And yet people today, they feel a sense of shame when they need help, when they're not fully independent, when they need to depend on someone else. They feel a sense of shame. And for some people, it is a crippling task to ask for help. But our text here is clear as day. 2 is better than 1. They work better together. They can aid each other. They can warm each other. They can protect each other. There is a huge value to relationship and to community. And you would be a fool to abandon those things in the pursuit of a life of solitude and independence. You'd be a fool. One of the hobbies that I have is fishing. I really enjoy fishing. And some guys go out and they spend all day doing fly fishing on the river, and I've done that a little bit. But when it comes to fishing, I am a bass fisherman for sure. Like I dabble with other fish here and there, but if I'm going fishing, 9 times out of 10, I'm going for bass, smallmouth bass here in Nova Scotia. I would love someday to go to Ontario or elsewhere and fish for largemouth bass. That would be a dream. But for now, I go out on my kayak and I fish for bass. However, bass you can pick right up from the mouth, right? And you'll get little rips on your thumb a little bit. Bass thumb is what we call it. As the summer draws on, it gets tougher and tougher. It doesn't hurt to hold a bass in that way. The spikes on the top of their spine, that can hurt a little bit. But we have another fish that is invasive in Nova Scotia called a pickerel. It's like a southern pike in a way. And it's long. We call them chain link pickerels. And they are toothy. You do not want to pick one of these guys up from the mouth. It's not good. You pick them up from the gills if you need to that way. Or just net the thing. But in fishing, you have your fishing line, right? So you have your rod and reel, whether you're using a spinning reel or bait caster or something else. I'm a spinning guy primarily. I do have a bait caster, but I'm a spinning guy primarily. And so you have your rod and your reel, and then you put your line on it. I like to use plastic worms and topwater lures and stuff like that for my fishing. However, when it comes to the line, you have some choices. You have monofilament, which is probably the most common one that people use. It's the clear one. You can break it with your teeth, but that means that pickerel, he can break it with his teeth as well and take your lure with him. And it's mono, right? One. And it's monofilament. And so it's just this one continuous, it's almost like a plasticky kind of wire or rope. And you can break it with your teeth. You can cut it with a knife, with pliers. It's very easy to break. If you get hooked on a rock and you put too much tension on, it'll just snap. What I have switched to is what is called braid, and I love it. If you are an angler and you haven't tried braided fishing line, you need to switch to it and give it a try. It's thinner. You can cast further. You feel every single thing. If a fish taps it, you can hold it until you feel it pull with it, and then you can this isn't a fishing video, it's a sermon. Anyhow, braid it, but one of the benefits of it, and you can tell by the name, it's these threads. I don't even know what it's made out of, but it's all braided together, and it is extremely strong. It's so strong, you have to be careful not to wrap it around your fingers because it'll cut into you, and the fish they can bite on that thing all day. They're not getting through it. For most fish, well, at least all the fish I have here in Nova Scotia, and sometimes, even with my little pliers, I have to go a couple times on it to get through. Right, a 3/4 rope is not easily broken. When it stands alone, the monofilament, it can break really easily. But when we're intertwined, when we're involved in each other's lives, dependent upon one another, in a community, in proper community, the way that God wanted us to be, we're stronger. And this applies to the home, and this applies to the church. In the home, a family is better when it is together. The family model that God put in place, that we see put in place in the Bible, is a father and a mother raising their children. And there is some in the world who will try and tell you that a single mother home is just as healthy as the nuclear home, or that a single father home, or that a divided home, or that a broken home can be just as healthy. Let me just say right here, that idea is born out of delusion. It is, statistically they're wrong. Every evidence out there, they're wrong. The nuclear family is the healthiest model, and it's the one that God put in place, where we have a unity together, where we have community together, where the parents can depend on one another, and they can lean on one another and support one another and raise their children together. And the children need a good mother, and the children need a good father, and they both bring something different to the table, but together they bring a small micro community that is the family, that is healthy when it's in that way. And so we see that this idea of being intertwined and dependent and community together is in the family, but it's also in the church. The church should be together. And I hope when you think of your brothers and sisters in the church, if you're at LifeSong, when you think of the people that make up LifeSong, if you're part of another church, when you think of your brothers and sisters in the church, that you think of people that you can work with, that you can aid, and that they can aid you. I'm not quite sure to say about keeping each other warm, but that you can protect one another, but that you can be involved in each other's life and be of benefit to one another. You are not acquaintances. You are not common strangers. You're not buddy from down the road. You are brothers and sisters, and that should mean something. I have 3 kids. He's 8 months, almost 9 months, I guess. But my other 2, my first is a daughter, and then I have my son. And when I talk to them and I tell them that they should love each other and they should care for each other and they should look out and protect one another, and it warms my heart when I see them do that. The other night, I was on the couch with my wife, our baby, and then my youngest son. I think our daughter was in bed already. And our youngest son, just out of the blue, he says, "Oh, I love Lily, and I love Mommy, and I love Daddy, and I love Theo. I love everyone in my house. And I love Foxy, his little stuffed fox." And it's just such a nice thing to hear, the unity and love inside of the family. And so the question comes, when our Heavenly Father looks down on us, on our relationship, does he take delight in what he sees? Or does he wish that we were more unified, that we were supporting one another, that we were mourning with each other and rejoicing with each other, and that we were in each other's lives? And then there's the point of those who don't gather. And you can even come and sit in the pew here on the other side of this window every Sunday and still be ungathered if you're not spending time with each other. You can come, you can listen to the message, sing songs with us, and then you can flee. And that doesn't mean necessarily that you get up and bolt as soon as we say amen, but that you're not engaged with other people and that you move on. And you don't really, if you think of the people that fill the sanctuary and you don't know those people, you're not involved in their life, I'll tell you right now, that's a problem. The church is not this building that I'm sitting in right now. I did this to our children the other day in Sunday school. I was teaching them, and I knew that the lesson for the next week and for midweek with the parents was about the theology of the church. And so I asked the table of kids, elementary ed kids, I said, "Have any of you ever been to church?" Well, they're sitting in a church. And so, of course, they all said yes. And then I said, "Well, guess what? You're all wrong." And I said, "But you'll find out this week how you're wrong." And well, how they were wrong is that you don't go to church. You gather with the church. The church is people, not a place. And it's important for us to gather and to be involved in each other's lives. In Hebrews 10, it says this: "Let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. So we should be stirring each other up in love and in good works. We should be encouraging each another. And how can we do that if we are neglecting to meet together? How can I speak into your life if I'm not taking time with you? And so I'll also say this, as part of the church and as one of the shepherds here at Lifezone, as one of the pastors, how much I want you to be in the flock, and also how difficult it is to lead, feed, and protect someone when they stay outside of the pasture. And so you can see how important it is to be a part of the church. That's our text for today. I have some questions I want to ask you, and then I'll end the recording. Questions are this. Why are you working? How are you using what you have gained from your work? Are you intertwined in the church? Are you intertwined in the church? And is your unity and love with your brothers and sisters evident in your life? Go through that text again. Take some time to think about those questions. And then if you don't like the answers, if the answer doesn't line up with the text, then make the appropriate changes, that you're working for the right reasons, that you're using what you gain from your work for the right reasons, that you are involved in your church, and that there's evidence in your life of your relationship with your brothers and sisters in Christ. Lord, thank you for your word, and I thank you for my brother and sister on the other side of this screen. And I hope that you'll be with them, or that they'll be aware that you're with them throughout the week, and that they will honor you in all that they do. Have a great week. Represent God well.